In the last video, we saw that genao, the Greek word for begotten, is never applied to Jesus' experience with the Father outside of the context of Psalms chapter 2, verse 7. And that passage is referring not to his origin, but to his resurrection. And so this leaves us with the conclusion that there is no statement in the Bible that calls Jesus the begotten Son of God. But you say, I know the Bible. John 3:16 plainly says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. But the word here is not genao, it's monogenēs, a different Greek word. And this word is used in reference to Jesus only by the Apostle John. It's used 5 times, twice in John chapter 1, twice in John chapter 3, and once in 1 John chapter 4. Outside of John's usage, Luke uses this. And in Luke's usage, he literally is referring to an only begotten child, a child that is the only born child of its parent. However, the book of Hebrews also uses monogenēs, and it uses it in a different way. It uses monogenēs not to refer to the only child born of a parent, but to distinguish that child from other children that were begotten to that parent. This is Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17. The end of it says that he, talking of Abraham, that had received the promises, offered up his only begotten son. His monogenēs. But here monogenēs cannot be referring to Isaac being the only begotten child of Abraham, because we know he was not. Before Isaac, Abraham begot Ishmael. After Isaac, he begot at least 6 children from Keturah. So Abraham had many sons begotten of him. Isaac was not the only begotten son. And so monogenēs cannot in this context be referring to the only begotten. This brings us to the other and a different definition of monogenēs, which is used in Greek literature outside of the New Testament, where it's distinguishing, it's saying the one and only child. It's a unique child, and emphasizing that child's uniqueness and their unique relationship with their father. Particularly here with Isaac, he's unique in the context of other children who are begotten of the father. So when we look at John's usage of monogenēs, the only one who applies it to Jesus, we must understand, are you, John, using this word in the sense that Luke uses it? Or are you using it in the sense that the author of Hebrews is using it? In John chapter 1, the first instance of this word being used in application to Jesus, we find verse 14. And the word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the monogenēs of the Father, full of grace and truth. Is this using it as Luke, or is this using it like Hebrews? Look in verse 12. It says, but as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons, plural, of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were genao, born, begotten, not of blood, nor of the will of flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. These are other sons of God who are genao, who are born of them. Then the next verse, we find John using monogenēs to refer to Jesus. Here we find not Luke's usage of the term, we find a passage very similar to Hebrews' usage in chapter 11, verse 17. We find other sons that are begotten of the Father, other sons of God that are genao of him. And then we find a distinguishing mark between those sons and Jesus, the unique, the one and only Son of God. Skip to chapter 3 of John, where he uses the word twice. He also used it in chapter 1, verse 18, but that's in the same context of the passage we just looked at. In chapter 3 of John, verse 16 and verse 18, he uses this word again, referring to Jesus. But in the context, we have the statements to Nicodemus. Verse 3, Jesus says, verily, verily, I say unto you, except a man be genao again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Verse 6, that which is genao of the flesh is flesh, and that which is genao of the spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I said unto thee, you must be genao again. Here, Jesus is saying to Nicodemus, you need to have that John chapter 1 experience. You need to believe on me. You need to receive me so that you may be genao, become a begotten son of God. However, Nicodemus, don't get it confused. Even if you are a begotten son of God, like Ishmael, like Keturah's sons, you are distinct from the Monogenēs of God. You are distinct from the one and only Jesus, the Son of God. Here again, not Luke's usage, but the Hebrews usage. Jumping over to the last use of this word in relation to Jesus, 1 John chapter 4, John uses it in verse 9. "In this was manifested the love of God toward us, because that God sent his Monogenēs, his only begotten Son, into the world that we might live through him." Again, what does the context say? Verse 7, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is genao," begotten, born of God, and knoweth God. But even though they're sons of God, even though they're begotten of God, don't be confused. You are distinct from, unique, the unique and the special, the one and only Son of God in verse 9, the one that he sent into the world. Remember, it's John that's the only one to use Monogenēs in application to Jesus, but it's only John who makes such a strong emphasis on the Christian's experience as being a begotten Son of God. Remember in chapter 3 of 1 John, John says this in verse 1, "Behold what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God." Verse 2, "Beloved, now are we the sons of God." It's John who emphasizes that all those who believe and receive on Jesus are begotten of him. So it's logical that John is the only one who would use Monogenēs to distinguish us from that one and only unique Son of God. If we see this as the way that John is using it, then we have Monogenēs in the Hebrews concept. Not emphasizing that Jesus is begotten of the Father, but distinguishing him from the other begotten sons. With this usage, I repeat, we have no statement in the Bible, Old or New Testament, that says Jesus was begotten of the Father.